Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about how our childhood, i.e., our past, shapes and manifests our present and our future. Now, before I go ahead into addressing the topic, I'd also like us to reflect that quite a few of us, if not every one of us, believe in past life or lives, which in a way is showing up and affecting and impacting our present life and life circumstances. And yet, weirdly enough, many of us do not think that our childhood can affect us even today, can affect us in our future decision makings and choices as well. And I think that that's something to reflect upon, to ponder upon. So, now coming back to the topic and moving ahead with the topic as well, and going with the assumption that most of us understand three levels to our existence, three levels to our mind, to our state of mind. One being of the conscious awareness, and the other two aspects of our lives, of our relationships, of our existence, of our minds, is the subconscious and the unconscious, also called as Chetana or Chetanman, the consciously aware one, and the Avchetan or the Achetanman, which is the subconscious and the unconscious awareness. So, why did I say the subconscious and the unconscious awareness? Well, like the word itself says, subconscious, quite literally meaning below or under the level of consciousness, primarily entailing that it is there, it is present, but our focus is not directed towards it. We are not deliberately and intentionally aware about it, aware of it. It is operating under the radar. It is hidden beneath the veil. It is something that is operating, functioning beneath the level of our conscious awareness. It is operating automatically, and in a way, if I can put it, almost mechanically and robotically. And if I can give it an analogy or draw a comparison to make it more relatable, I'd say that it's like the photocopy machine. The machine that will print out n number of copies of sheet of paper or papers. The command, the instruction, the information which has already been fed into the machine, and it will churn out those many number of copies automatically, mechanically, robotically, without needing any attention or intervention. And that is how exactly, in very similar ways, our subconscious and our unconscious operates. And it's not just our subconscious and our unconscious minds, it's our subconscious and our unconscious existence that operates in a similar way. So, our subconscious and our unconscious mind, and thereby our subconscious and our unconscious existence, is like that photocopy machine. It'll keep repeating and churning out the same thing over and over and over and over again because a new command has not been given to it. A new experience has not been put or installed into it. A new intervention has not taken place. It runs on an automatic, mechanical, robotic manner. In a way, it's very mechanized and thereby very habitual as well. Because just like our habits, which are an accumulation, a memory storage of the past and the past and the past and the past, which has been built up till today, our subconscious is also the stack of the past information and had been given a command, had been given the information to churn out so many copies. till it's interrupted or till the time it has completed printing out those many copies, which in a way tells us that it's built and designed by repetition, which essentially are patterns that have been copied and recopied 50 or even 50 million times throughout the course of our lifetime, at least till date. And in a way, it quite logically tells us that it's the past that has been copied so many times that it is presenting before us in our present, and thereby, to some degree, will have an impact on our future as well. Now, before delving into the original topic which I wanted to address, let's also take a moment to recognize as to why it's built that way, as to why it's even necessary. It's necessary because our brain, our nervous system, our sensory system all work separately and as one unit, as pattern recognizing organs and systems, individually and collectively as well, so that it can anticipate and predict the future and in a way mitigate or avoid losses to some degrees, and because of which it occupies a rather larger chunk of our mind and of our existence. So, now having that as a backdrop to have an understanding of the three layers of our mind and of our existence, to then also now moving ahead as to how our childhood, wherein our subconscious and our unconscious gets formed the most, the foundation of which gets laid here, imprints and impacts and infringes our present and our future in almost all aspects of our lives, personally and professionally. So I had presented this question in front of a lot of people, including myself, not just to have the answers, but even to make them reflect as to what made them feel loved, as to what made them feel safe, as to what made them feel appreciated, considered, and acceptable when they were kids and when they were growing up. And let's re-emphasize here that it is essentially during the initial formative years of our lives that our subconscious and our unconscious is primarily formed and informed. And to that question, I had received some interesting answers, and a few of them I'd like to share here with you. Somebody had said that they needed to be loving in order to receive love, in order to feel loved, which in a way caught me by surprise, and which is why I asked them, so are you telling me that you're not a loving person? And the person's response to that was that at times I'm loving and at times I'm not. But when I was growing up, I needed to be loving. I had to be loving if I were to expect any kind of love in return, which in a way tells me that though it's beautiful, and yet the person could not be their whole full self. They had to behave in a certain way to be able to receive any kind of love and affection. Some people also interestingly told me that they needed to be agreeable towards everything that their parents expected of and from them. And so, in that group, some went on to tell me that it was very stressful to be agreeable all the time because they never had a voice. They never could opinionate their thoughts or share their thoughts. They could not completely express themselves. While as some others said that they went passive, docile, and remained complacent. And there were a few who also added, I was the typical obedient kid, the good kid, who just went along with everything that was expected of and from them. However, I could not miss the tone of sadness and disappointment that somewhere along the way they lost themselves. And though they are grown ups now, they are still trying to figure out who they are. Someone also interestingly said that I needed to be the bad kid, the rebellious kid, the outrageous kid, because my sibling was so good in my parents' eyes that either I would have had to compete with my sibling and outdo them, and then feel better about myself and keep doing that for the rest of my life. Or I could do it by taking a different tangent altogether, which of course also led to comparisons. But slash and it also caught my parents' eyes differently. Some people also mentioned that in order to gain my parents' love, in order to gain their appreciation, or rather earn their love and appreciation, I needed to be the materially successful one. I needed to be the one who got loads and loads of accolades. I needed to be the popular one. I needed to be the successful one. Because not being any of that would have made my parents neglectful towards me, would have made my parents shame me, blame me, and criticize me. And it is through getting these accolades, it is through getting these applauses, it is through these kind of material successes that I get any kind of recognition, acceptance, and love from my parents. And insightfully enough, some people also said that unfortunately, it's not unconditional. And yet, fortunately, we know the conditions through which we get love and appreciation. Some people, though very few, also said that they needed to be the funny one in the family. They needed to be the joker in their family to feel loved and to feel appreciated. Very interestingly, somebody also mentioned that with one of their parents, they needed to be the docile one, the obedient one, the compliant one. While as with the other parent, they needed to be the more outrageous one. They needed to be the rebel so that that particular parent could see them as an equal in their eyes, which in a very weird way made the relationship towards this kid very respectful and very challenging at the same time, because they needed to be at loggerheads with this other parent to be considered as an equal, as good enough to be their kid. Someone also sadly said that since their parents' marriage or relationship was a stressful one, they very early on had to be the parents' drinking partner and the other parent's shoulder to cry on to. And unfortunately, though both of their parents have now passed, they are still playing those roles in somebody's life or the other, even after years. And if I can cite some examples from some movies to help us understand how these earliest childhood experiences, the memories of these experiences, have seemingly unknowingly and have yet, in a very subconscious, unconscious, habituated, patterned way, impacted and infringed our present, which at one point in time was our future. So, if we can consider the example of the recently released movie Sitare Zameen Par, wherein the character played by Amir Khan, who's a basketball coach and unfortunately doesn't have the physical stature, that is his height, develops and manifests as a character, as a personality who feels victimized by his circumstances, which he naturally was, which he felt were unjust, but then projects it in very aggressive and defiant ways, at least many a times. He gets into brawls and fights wherein he feels threatened, wherein he feels that he is not being paid due attention, or is not being heard, or is not being respected. On the other hand, at the same time, we also see a side of him which is very avoidant. He doesn't show up on time. He tries to subtly bribe the judge by asking her what would be the penalty charges that he would need to pay in order to excuse himself as a coach of the team members that were differently abled, that behaved differently, that looked at the world differently, that understood the world differently, that interacted with the world differently. And if we would look a little deeper, we would also understand that he was harshly judging those same people in exactly the same way. Like he was judged by his peers, by the others, as the short one out. He was also avoidant in his relationship with his wife, wherein she wanted to communicate and he just wanted to turn a deaf ear to it and then expected things to pan out exactly how he wants them to pan out. Because somewhere in his subconscious, when his father left him, he got the message, or rather, he internalized the message that he was a bad kid, not a lovable kid, which is why his father left him, which is why his father abandoned him. And all of those narratives are so deep rooted that we don't even recognize them. And quite naturally, when he gets the message that he is not enough, he is not enough with regards to his height to be accepted in the basketball team, that he is not enough as a kid for his father to stay back. How can he be good enough as a father? He also avoided taking the lifts and rather preferred taking the staircase because somewhere in his childhood, the fear of being closed in, the fear of not having any escape or any route to move out, of feeling dead, of feeling trapped, made him take the staircase rather than the lift. And all of these were childhood fears which were manifesting in his life much later in his life that we could see on the screen in his present reality. Let's consider another example from the movie PK, wherein Anushka Sharma's character Jaggu, till the very end, throughout the movie, in some way or the other, is trying to gain her father's acceptance, her father's approval, her father's sense of pride in her father's appreciation and his love. Wherein in one of the scenes at one point in time, she shares with PK that there was a point in time that her father had felt so proud of her, that he had whistled and applauded her performance in front of the entire school, which felt like the world to her. And today it is the same father who disapproves of her, who feels ashamed of her, just because his self esteem, his sense of pride, his self worth rested on her shoulders and on her back. And thereby she is the only cause that has brought him shame as well. And if we look a little more deeply, if we reflect on that a little more, it would also tell us that to some degree, the character Jaggu's sense of self-worth was also attached, rather enmeshed, with her father. Because unless he acknowledged her, unless he approved of her, unless he applauded for her, unless he felt any sense of pride in her, she did not feel any of that for herself. And the reverse of it was also true. And these are all aspects of our childhood issues and our childhood wounds, i.e., traumas, which, if not timely resolved, which, if not timely acknowledged and accepted, manifests in a lot of ways in our experiences, in our lives, and in our relationships, even much later in life, even a few decades later in our lives. And unless we take out the time to reflect on these, to acknowledge these, to resolve these, metaphorically, symbolically, too many decades later also, we'll be taking out the same copies whose instructions and thereby its programming has not been reset. And unfortunately, resetting does not happen in automatic mechanical ways. It has to be done intentionally, it has to be done consciously. So let's try and reflect as to how our childhood or the effects of our childhood experiences, i.e., our subconscious and our unconscious, are manifesting in our lives and in our relationships today, in our habitual behavioral predetermined patterns. Let's try and recognize them, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.